All right, so today we're going to be doing something a little bit different in the sense that this is practice for me. So recently I've been practicing figure drawing. And if you don't know what that is, it's drawing sort of based off of life, the human form, and trying to do poses, gestures, stuff like that. So what I have here is there's a website. I think it's called Sketch Daily References or something like that. If you look up figure drawing references, it's like the first thing. Basically, you can put in some parameters and it'll pull up just figure drawing references. Full disclaimer, I know that the image is like a little, I guess, I don't know, scandalous, whatever you'd like to call it. I tried to choose an image that was the least that, but part of figure drawing is, all of figure drawing is drawing the human form from life, really trying to figure out how the body works. And that's why I chose this image, this pose. It's just to look at the pose and try to figure out how do things connect, how does the musculature of the human body work, and really like what looks right when you're drawing. So what I've done is with the red, I have gone in and I've made just the positions of the head, the torso, the waistline, and then the joints of the arms and legs, and then connected them. With the legs, I did curvatures. I really like using sort of the connection lines there as the top of the thigh and sort of the midline of the shin. So that's kind of what those represent. And then I'm going in over that with the black with a very rough sketch. And this is to sort of show some of the muscles and the outline of the body. So you can tell like one of the ones that's most defined on here, because it's one of the ones that I like most, is the sort of like shoulder muscle. It's sort of like a weird bendy teardrop shape. And that's one that I find particularly helpful. I've seen it, I'm not technically doing it 100% correct in the sense that there's a lot of, different muscles. And when you do sort of these construction things, from what I've seen at least, I'm taking an online class on Skillshare, which this video is not sponsored or anything, but basically building those muscles so that you can build the body off of them. However, the model that I'm using is not very defined in terms of muscle. And so I'm not putting all of those in. I'm just kind of going with the outline with like this rough sketch. The muscles for the shoulders I do find helpful though, so I put those ones in. And then after I kind of get this really rough sketch outline here, I go ahead and turn off the red construction layer and I turn the opacity of my original sketch down. And then what I'm going to do over that is try to make a cleaner sketch of the body outline, as well as some indication lines for where there would be like curves or something like that in the body. So I'm trying to indicate muscles and the shapes of the body without actually drawing all of them. So like a good example is there on the shoulder. Instead of drawing that whole shoulder muscle, what I'm doing is I'm drawing just a couple of lines to indicate that that's where that is. In addition, along sort of the chest and torso section, to indicate the rib cage, all I've done is given one sort of short little curved line. Also going through, I'm trying to fix some things that were wrong in the original sketch, like the hands I felt were way too large in the original sketch. So I'm causing those to be a little smaller, just shrinking them down. And then I'm going to go along this whole sketch just doing this sort of this cleaner outline of what I've already drawn, fixing things along the way, trying to make it fit the original reference drawing a little closer. Now, this drawing that I'm doing here for me is just reference practice, basically. So I've found this website, I've pulled up an image and I'm using it as a reference and then practicing my figure drawing. The reason I'm doing that is that I'm not like classically trained in figure drawing. I've not taken any real courses for it, and it's an area that I'm not super well versed in. And as an artist, I think that one of the most important things you can do is to practice the things you're not very good at. So figure drawing is an area that I'm not classically trained in or, have a ton of experience doing. And something that I'd really like to be able to do in my own art is to sort of come up with my own poses and then draw them without having to necessarily look up reference. Reference is really good and helpful, but there's a lot of times where maybe you can't find the right reference image. You know, you have a certain pose in mind, and you just can't find something that matches it, you know, perfectly or all that well. So my goal here is to, through drawing from reference and practicing the forms, the shapes, the gesture of the body, I'm going to be able to, by the end of this, you know, draw my own poses without having to find a reference for them. That's not to say reference is bad. Please use reference. It's wonderful. It's very helpful. It's not like cheating or anything. I think every, you know, good artist uses reference an incredible amount. Originality and creativity go a long ways, but also being able to see something similar to the thing you're trying to make is incredibly helpful and not a tool to like be used lightly. So what I've done now, I've roughed in just some parts of the body, the face, the hair, the general outline. And the goal of this is not to be photorealistic, not even close. The goal of this is to just get the shapes and the forms of the body to make something that looks plausible or possible. After I do that, what I'm going to do here is I'm sort of scratching in some shadows. Now, the original model has sort of this like body paint going on, which makes it a little more difficult to see where shadows actually fall because the paint itself has like darker areas and lighter areas, and it's been painted on to sort of reflect that. It's art on top of reference, which it's meant to look reflective at certain points, even if it's not. So that makes this a little more difficult, but not impossible. So what I'm trying to do is really find areas that are obscured from the light that you can tell are significantly darker and scratch the shadow in there. I don't end up liking the way I did the shadow. I had my brush size really, really small, and I was sort of scratching it in. If I had to do this over again, I would up my brush size quite a bit and sort of block in the shadow with a low opacity brush. So like that way I could go over a swath of area very quickly, and then if it wasn't dark enough, go over it again, and then blur it just slightly to blend those areas, or use a smudge tool. But for this one, I went with the sort of scratching thing that I'm doing here, and it ends up working out okay, but I would change it if I did it again. So as I go here, something that's important to note is that as you can tell, I'm not putting in a ton of detail to the body. There are parts of the body that sort of fold and crease that I'm not really paying attention to. There's highlights that I'm not really paying attention to. And a really good area to note for that is sort of this bottom right foot where, you know, there's all these creases and folds in the skin and different curvatures to the foot. There's the toes. All these different parts of the feet that I'm just completely ignoring. I'm just blocking in the shadow. And the reason for that is that my personal study here is not to learn the details so much as it is to learn the form of the body. And therefore, I'm sort of skipping over those details in favor of practicing the form. And then later on, once I get the form down and I feel very comfortable about where my figure drawing is at in terms of form, then I can go back and start working on those details. The interesting thing here is I'm not in college for art. I'm in college for engineering. And I have not been classically trained in anything. This is all just self-learning, looking things up on YouTube or Skillshare or, you know, whatever's available to me, and just trying to figure it out. And I would, if you're an artist, recommend you do that too. It's pretty fun. It's a good way to practice. I've currently set a goal for myself to do one drawing a day. Sort of, for me right now, it's figure drawing, just because that's an area I feel like I need to practice in. You can tell after I had that all scratched in, I went in with a smudge tool and just blended things together. I didn't like how holy and scratchy it was, so I blurred it and blended it. And then I'm playing with the saturation and darknesses here, trying to put like a shadow on this like pipe thing that she's standing on, and just overall just changing up a few things just to make sure it looks kind of realistic. Well, maybe not realistic, but closer to the image. I also do some things up on the face. I add a little bit of shadow around the nose and the eyes, and then I darken the hair because I think it's kind of weird to just be able to see straight through the hair. So those are just some minor edits that I do to try to make it look a little better. But that's basically it. That's all I do here, just to practice these gestures, these forms, and the proportions. So this is kind of the final version here. I do want to show some things that I think are interesting. First off, the construction, with this sort of red drawing that I did. So here it is, the drawing that I did for the construction by just sort of looking at the image and drawing it on another monitor. And then if I outline the construction on the original image, we can note some differences. We can see that some of my angles were off. I drew a few things too large. The shoulders were a little bit too broad. It's important when you're trying to practice things to go through and see what's right and what's wrong, and to make notes of it, and to really try to better those areas. So that's an area where I had a little bit of a mess up and something that I could improve. I think something else that's very interesting to look at is if I turn off everything except for this like weird shadow layer that I did, you can actually see the form of the subject without any of the sort of bounding lines. So you can still tell sort of the pose that this person is making, even without the outline, without their body shape, just the shadow itself. That's not anything to do with sort of like classical figure drawing. I just think it's very cool. And then finally, here is the full comparison of my sort of rendition next to the model themselves. And it's good to look at these because you can sort of note some of the areas that are different and things that you could change. For me particularly, I noticed that the sort of like back is not as arched in mine as it is in the original model. The legs are at different angles a little bit and a little bit large, and the shoulders are quite a bit broader. Another thing is that the left arm is planed outward and not as close to the body. Those are just some things that I noticed, but I would recommend that if you're an artist and you want to practice, getting better at art and things, look up some websites to get different images so that you can draw from reference, practice them, look up YouTube courses. I try my best, but I'm not a professional artist by any means. So I would recommend, looking for people that do this as a job and really, really practicing and trying to get in a lot of time with practice. So that's today's episode. I hope everyone enjoyed it, and I'll let other me say goodbye. As always, thanks for watching this video, and remember to like, subscribe, and share with your family, your friends, and that weird neighbor down the street. Also, if you like what I do here, be sure to check out my Patreon to help out. And until next time, I hope everyone has a nice day.